Hey, welcome to the Achieve Your Goals podcast. This is your host, Hal Elrod, and today we're going to talk about how to reinvent yourself at any age. Often in life, we get to points where we stop and we ask ourselves, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? How did I get to this point? And where am I going? And often life can feel purposeless, and it can cause us to feel depressed or anxious or scared. And so today, my guest, Mike Koenigs, is the perfect person to help talk about how to reinvent yourself at any age. 5 years ago, Mike went from being as successful as anybody you'd ever know to wanting to be dead, and had to reinvent himself at, I forgot the exact age, I'll ask him, but in his 50s, I believe. And Mike, in case you don't know who he is, I've had him on the podcast a while back, and this will be our second conversation on the Achieve Your Goals podcast. Mike is the author of over a dozen books, created multi-million-dollar businesses and sold those businesses. He has coached Joe Polish, co-author of the Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery. He's coached Paula Abdul, actor Richard Dreyfuss, the one and only Tony Robbins, and many more, as well as my good friend Justin Donald, author of The Lifestyle Investor. And today, Mike is rebuilding his life, and as successful as he's ever been, as he's helping others to create the life of their dreams. His new book is called Your Next Act: How to Create a Business You'll Love for the Rest of Your Life. So if reinventing yourself at whatever age you are is helpful and important for you, here we go.
All right. How you doing, my friend?
Mike, it's so good to be in studio with you, man.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm glad. I know you had a show to do, and you happen to be in town for it's your sister-in-law's birthday?
Yeah, 40th birthday. That's right.
Well, congratulations. Sounds like you're going to have some fun. But yeah, it's great to have you. I miss you. We don't spend enough time together, but this is a great way to connect again.
Yeah, no, it worked out. I had a virtual keynote to give, and I thought my internet at the Airbnb probably isn't reliable. So I thought, who do I know in San Diego that has a studio that I could use? And man, your studio's dialed in. In fact, I have studio envy as I'm here going, man, Mike has got everything dialed in.
Well, the one thing I will tell you is if you can work in an environment that when you have a creative idea and you can just produce really good looking content and get it out there, I find it very inspiring. I always love walking in here, and you heard me when I came in today, and I said, studio on to my Alexa device, right. And and boop boop, all the lights turn on. But it's a fun little tech place.
Yeah, you're on the cutting edge of technology always. Yeah. So let's dive in. You and I, before we started recording, we were talking about 5 years ago, and really you at a real low point. And I've experienced similar low points where I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue living, which is about as low as it gets. And so talk about that time in your life and how you reinvented yourself. And by the way, what age were you at that point, since I didn't know?
Yeah, so I was, so I'm 56 now, so I'll call it like 51, 52.
Okay.
Yep. And so here's what had happened is I had been, from a backgrounder, I grew up in a small town in Eagle Lake, Minnesota. I taught myself to code when I was very young, so I learned how to program. And I really wanted to run away from home and go work for Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak when I was 14 years old. I used to have a backpack packed.
Okay.
And then I wrote code. I ended up writing video games for a little while and started an agency. I sold that and then started 2 software companies, and they were growing, eventually sold those, and then started another business. And one day I woke up and I just felt trapped. I couldn't articulate this at the time, but the best way to describe it is later on I realized I felt like I had outgrown who I was, what I did, why I did it, who I did it for, and I just didn't have a compelling future. I just wasn't getting up feeling excited. And I learned later on that my hormones were off also. You start losing your testosterone in your 50s.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the frog in a pot of water where, I wasn't sleeping well. I was not sleeping at all in many cases. I was starting having anxiety attacks. And a lot of my business was falling apart. And here I am, I'm supposed to be this guru guy, and I'm losing about $150,000 a month. My marketing systems were failing and broken. And I had also contractually, I was on the hook for 6 hotel contracts, each of which were probably $250,000 each.
And this is for live events that you had committed to put on.
Yep. And so I think all that's kind of necessary because I felt a lot of pressure and suddenly I just hated my business. And despite the fact that I had had all the success, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? And to unravel my business commitments would have cost $2 million. So I'm like, that's a big dent. That's a big check for anyone to write out.
Yeah.
And didn't have anyone I felt comfortable talking to or turning to because my ego was so big that getting out of my way and asking for help and saying, I am lost, I'm scared, I'm afraid, was more than I could bear.
Yeah.
And now
you're supposed to have all the answers, right? You're coaching everybody else on how to overcome the stuff you're now struggling with. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And so I just sat and suffered for a couple months, and eventually I did get some coaches to work with me, like some energy coaches and health coaches. I got some hormone treatments, which made a difference. But I really had to do some deep work and unravel what was a lot of trauma that goes back to my childhood for sure, that I'd never really done the work on. And I thought, at the time after dealing with cancer, a lot of stuff got fixed, I think. I felt a lot better, but I clearly hadn't done the deep work.
Yeah.
So I got a coach who put me in some very difficult situations, just rewiring my brain. And then I also sat down one day with Dan Sullivan, and I said, Dan, I feel really lost, and I'm not sure what I should do. And he gave me some advice. And I took the advice. I did exactly what he said, and suddenly the answers started to appear. And then over the next couple of years, I started fixing what was broken.
So I got to know, what was Dan's advice?
Okay. So Dan has a system. He's got a couple
By the way,
things.
Dan Sullivan, if anyone doesn't know, if anybody gives good advice, tested advice, it's Dan Sullivan. So you asked the right guy.
He's he's been one of my coaches for over a decade. He's also a good friend, and I do a podcast with him. So I have this opportunity to be with a guy who's 78 years old. He's the most productive human being I've ever known.
Wow.
He writes at least 5 books a year. So he does 4 quarterly books, and then he does an annual book as well, that become like bestsellers. He does 10 podcasts, and then he leads strategic coach, and he teaches and educates at least hundreds of founders and business owners. They have over 3,000 clients. So they're known as the 800-pound gorilla in the coaching world. But here's what his advice was. So first of all, there's something called the Dan Sullivan question. And the question goes like this. If you and I were to meet 3 years from today, what needs to happen personally and professionally for you to feel happy with your progress? And that's a deep, deep question. And it's intended to do a whole bunch of things, but one of them is to imagine a compelling, moving future. And so that's the core. And then there's something he calls DOS, which is D for dangers, O for opportunities, S for strengths. And so what dangers are you facing in your life right now? What are you afraid of? What keeps you up at night? The opportunities are, what are the opportunities that stand in front of you that you'd like to take advantage of? And sometimes maybe you can't because whatever, there's something in the way. And then strengths are, what are your strengths? What are your capabilities? And in Dan's languages, he calls it your unique ability.
Okay.
I call it your superpower. Gay Hendricks, for example, calls it your zone of genius.
Okay.
But I like to say if you could spend 99% of your time in your superpower, what would that be? And that usually is what you're known for, what you're great at, what you love to do.
What people around you say, you're the best at this. And what's your superpower? What did you define?
So my superpower is seeing someone's future potential. I can see their blue ocean. I can see their greatest version of themselves, and not only articulate it to them in a way that inspires them to want to create it and live in it, but also to share their message, to share their story, know what words to say, what stories to tell, and give that to them so they can communicate it to the world. So I take and give people a voice and help share their voice.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I know. Justin Donald called me a couple years ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about working with Mike Koenigs, and to help me figure out what my brand's going to be and my book and all of that. What do you think?" And I said, Mike's been a good friend for years. Highly recommended. He's as good as anybody to help you do that. And of course, Justin, now #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, author of The Lifestyle Investor, creator of the Lifestyle Investor brand, the Mastermind. I mean, he's just he is on a rocket ship. And
oh my God!
He credits a lot of that to you. So yeah, I mean, I will. I'm just attesting that is absolutely your superpower.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And what I will say about Justin, he was the guy that everyone needed but no one knew about. And he knew he'd love to speak. He knew he'd love to have products. He knew he'd like to have a book, but it's like, where do I start? I don't even know where to begin. And he, at age 40, he's in his, I think he's 41 right now. I believe he'll be a billionaire before he's 50. And this isn't about the money. It's about the impact he can create, but he's well on his way.
Wow.
He is exceptional. And that's, again, what sometimes you just need one person to believe in you and see your ultimate potential and help you understand what words to say to attract an audience to you. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of what I've developed into. And for whatever reason, I've always been pretty good at that, but I didn't have the skills or capabilities to make it happen. I knew that was a spark of possibility.
Got it. Yeah. All right, so let's go back. So 4 years ago, you are depressed, you are overwhelmed, you are in debt, you are bleeding 150 grand a month. That'd be a pretty rough for anybody to take. Yeah. You reach out to Dan Sullivan. Repeat the Dan Sullivan question again.
Yeah. So if you and I were to meet here 3 years from today, what will have happened personally and professionally for you to feel satisfied with your progress?
Okay. Yeah. All right. And so pick the story up there.
Yeah. So here's what happened. And he said, here's your assignment. I want you to go out and talk to 20 business owners, entrepreneurs, and do the DOS on them. And you can't sell them anything. You can't solve their problem. You just have to listen. Now, anyone who knows me knows I love to sell. Like because I'm really good at going, I know exactly what you need to do and how to solve the problem. And I either know someone who will get you there, or I know the steps to take. I can introduce you to those people and help you figure out and build a system. It's just, that's the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
So it was really hard, but here's what did happen. After I listened to 2, I already had the answer. And after I listened to 15, I really had the answer. And by the time I hit 20, I not only had an idea for what my next act would be, it was a compelling future that motivated me, and I realized I know what I want to do, potentially for the rest of my life.
And what was it?
What it turned into is I would help founders who were in the exact same place I was. Okay. So entrepreneurs, business owners, and I had spent years and years, at least 25 years, working with people who were had jobs and they wanted to become entrepreneurs, or they wanted to find a way to create a business and make money. And a lot of my products were like how to market with video, how to start your own digital marketing agency, how to write a book, how to speak, how to create your own digital products and create a footprint online. But that was always like kind of a one-to-many. I created digital products and I showed other people how to do the same.
Yeah.
But in this case, I realized that when I got real with a founder and told them what happened to me, they would say, someone would just start crying and go, that's exactly where I am, man. I've been suicidal for 10 years and I have no one to talk to about it. Or I've made my money, I'm bored and I'm stuck and I'm afraid to change. I've got this reason and this reason and this reason why I can't, or I can't imagine myself doing anything else. But they got stuck in an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And what often happens with many, I mean, just anyone, but especially I notice it in business owners, is we get into a trap of selling the same thing, feeling that we're worth X. So if you work for someone right now and you make $100,000 per year, that translates into a certain value per hour. And we believe that that's what we're worth. That's what the market will bear. If you're selling a product or service, you're like, oh, my clients would never pay more than X, or I have to do Y because the competition will do something. And that's all an illusion. It's all a story that you're telling yourself about your self-worth. So our self-esteem, our internal operating system is preventing us from believing in something bigger and better. So the bottom line, to answer your question, is I realized that what I knew how to do and what I had figured out for myself, and I was going to prove it for me first, and I knew I could do it for others. Sometimes it's easier to do for others than it is to do for you.
Sure.
But that I would help people create a personal brand that would amplify the value of everything else they're doing, which if I always use the example of Elon Musk. Whether you love him or hate him, he right now is, and I believe he'll be the first $1 trillion brand. There's very few people who are thinking about and actually putting stuff into space and are thinking about going to Mars.
Sure.
And have the capabilities of doing it and making money while he does it. He did create the first electric car company, but the most valuable car company in the world by a long shot. Okay. He gives away his patents. Okay. Anyone can use his patents. This guy's a visionary.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs has been dead for over 10 years, and his DNA lives on in Apple, and Apple's the most valuable company in the world. Okay. Now you think about Oprah, but you can go on down the line. Anyone who has a strong personal brand can touch something, and it is immediately worth 3 to even 100 times more than anyone else. And if I said to you, do you know who the CEO is of General Motors or of your cable company or your phone company?
Yeah.
What would your answer be?
Or Kellogg's, or who knows? Yeah.
Right. And you'd be like, not only do I not know, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. and if that organization had a character, a founder, a leader, a visionary leader who is a compelling storyteller, that brand would be worth a lot more right now. And that goes for anything you do. If you want to create an impact, you have to think like a movement maker. You have to think like a visionary, and you have to be willing to ask more of yourself and ask more of everyone else around you. And so that is what I decided to do, is help founders live inside their superpower, their zone of genius all the time, and create a brand and package their message in such a way that it would create a movement and inspire themselves and other people. And it's because the truth is, I needed it for me.
Yeah.
I felt broken inside and terrified and afraid and lost. And I needed some inspiration in order to survive. And when I was honest with other people that's exactly where I was, they opened up to me and said, I don't have anyone else to tell this to. I can't tell my wife. I don't feel comfortable. I will lose my business and my employees if someone knows that this is what's happening to me.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So let's break this down for anybody listening, because obviously your superpower of helping businesses and people create their personal brand is, for somebody listening, that might be completely foreign to what their superpower is.
Yep.
But I want to try to look at what you did to reinvent yourself, right? What were the steps? What were the principles? What were the ideas? One of the first one was clarity, like admitting to yourself, something has to change.
Yeah.
I can't go on like this, right? Then there was a big piece that I see as vulnerability, right? You had to be willing to ask for help, and I can relate to that. When I went through a very similar time in 2020 of, I was suicidal ideation every day. I wasn't sleeping, just like you. I wasn't sleeping. Real similar after cancer and chemo, and I don't know if there's a correlation there, but
there is for sure. I'm absolutely 100% certain that's the case. Yeah.
I had been on chemo for 3 years and stopped. I was literally sleeping 2 to 4 hours a night, and I got really depressed, and I was overwhelmed. I had started building a team, right? And then all of a sudden now the weight of me having to lead this group when I couldn't even lead myself, and I was having the anxiety attacks every day. I mean, I was a mess. And each day I would ask myself the question, how could I take my own life and not have my kids be significantly negatively impacted?
Yeah.
And I was not creative enough to, thank God, to figure out an answer. I'm like, every time I start to think, ooh, if I just drove off a bridge on accident, but I recorded a bunch of videos for them, telling them all my life lessons I wanted to share, maybe that would, that's not going to work.
No.
Right? Like it just always came to,
you can't engineer yourself out of that.
I tried. But to your point, being the guy that, I'm the author, I'm the speaker, I'm the coach, I'm the guru, right? Like, I'm supposed to, and it's like, it almost is like an identity crisis because you're like, why the hell, I'm supposed to have this figured out. If I can't, and who am I to now teach other people? That's the other piece is, wait, now my identity of the guy that can help others, I can't even help myself.
Yeah.
I'm a fraud. Who am I kidding, Yeah. So anyway, I'm going off on my tangent here of that experience. But
all those are real.
Yeah, but the point of being vulnerable, where you finally got to where you asked for help, let's just talk on that because I think that can be the biggest hurdle for people.
Yeah.
The fear of being vulnerable, but it's also arguably the single most important first step or next step, right? Yeah. And that alone, just asking for help. For the one conversation can be like, oh my gosh, you just shared something with me that I didn't even think about, and that's exactly what I needed. So talk about vulnerability and just the pros and the cons, and or at least what people perceive as cons.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened in my case is, first of all, that is a very, very difficult thing to unravel because it's like, why am I afraid to ask for help? You have to really be honest about that first. And I know for me, it was like, well, if someone finds out how lost and dark I am, and I am supposed to be an X, I'm supposed to be the guru with all the answers. I'm supposed to be this, in my niche anyway, relatively famous, successful guy who's wealthy, and I'm maintaining my illusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I have a character that I have to make other people believe in, or my customers will quit and not follow me because I'm a loser.
Yeah.
My employees will get afraid and quit because if I can't maintain the illusion of stability that they will have jobs,
oh God, I can relate.
all my systems will fall apart.
Yep.
And then the money disappears, and then that'll tap into my net worth that I've been working my ass off for 30 years. What I've accumulated in terms of wealth will disappear. I'll have to borrow against it. You start going through all these scenarios of how bad things can get.
Yeah.
And then what will happen with my wife? And then, like, will she abandon me?
Yeah.
Now, my wife and I have been through some really heavy crap together, but still, everyone's got their breaking point.
Sure.
Everyone, no matter what the illusory agreement appears to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and when you're in such a bad emotional space, you don't have a clear perspective. Like everything is colored negatively.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like you're like, oh, why would my wife? Well, I can't even stand being with myself. How is my wife going to want to stay with me?
Yeah. So that's what I call the spiraling. We all spiral when we go through these depressive things. That combined with no sleep, anxiety attacks, low testosterone, and God knows what other kind of poisons. And I do believe that after chemo, after radiation, after all these treatments, there's a cumulative toxicity that lives inside of us that takes years to get rid of unless it's done intentionally. Okay? So there's no doubt that happened. Plus, at 50 years old, I had a lot of unresolved childhood, not good enough, not being enough, I'm not enough trauma going on that I think just plowed into me. And then, like I say, a lack of a compelling future. One of the things that Tony Robbins talks about, he said to me a couple times, one of them is, why do people become suicidal? Why do they commit suicide? It's a lack of a compelling future.
Yep.
And the second one is nothing is as good or bad as it ever appears to be at first.
Yeah.
So, but again, when you're spiraling, all these things become accelerated and multiplied. So emotional wreckage. So to answer the question, so what did I do? How did I ask for help? I kind of had a couple angels show up in my life at once. One of them that was helpful is I did something called the Hoffman process, which is a beautiful act of forgiveness. So if you've ever heard of the Hoffman process or the Hoffman Institute, it's been around for decades. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're in transition. It's a way to really forgive yourself and to forgive where you came from. So I think practicing forgiveness is a key step in this. And that, again, is easier said than done. It's like, you didn't do anything wrong. You're not bad.
Yeah.
And you have to respect the fact that I believe midlife crisis is a chemical, it's a hormonal shift and a change. Like when here's something else that happened. I went through a period of time, I think my animal was terrified that it no longer was going to be making babies. And there was a certain animal uselessness that kicks in. And you talk to any woman who's gone through menopause and her changes, goes through that. When your body changes, you start gaining weight, all the hormonal stuff, and you wake up depressed. I mean, that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
And that's why we've got hormone replacement therapy. So sometimes chemical is good. The other thing I started doing is working out like a banshee. But when it came to the angels, okay, so Hoffman was one of them. And then I got a coach who is an energetic, a spiritual coach who isolated me for days at a time. And now remember, my business is falling apart. I'm terrified everything's going to go away.
Yeah.
And I did really, really hard exercises. One of them included, I wasn't allowed to do anything except meditate for 3 days. And it happened like less than a week before one of my big events that was make or break. And I didn't know what was going on at the time, but the exercise essentially was to prove to me that you will figure this out. Creativity loves time compression and deadlines. And I literally invented an offer that I made to an audience that I somehow conjured out of thin air to show up at one of my events. But I had to get really creative to fill up this thing so I wouldn't go broke. And that became one of the first dominoes to solve my problem. Now, how is that related to, another business owner or someone who doesn't have a business? First of all, you're not going to die, okay? Nothing really horrible is going to happen, and this is a story your brain is telling about how bad things could possibly be.
Yeah.
That's not real, and it didn't happen yet, okay?
Yeah.
And we're all much more resourceful than we think we are, and a lot stronger than we think we are. And I don't think that exercise can come from something internal. You've got to get external help. You've got to find a coach who can see you and help create that compelling future and help you live into it and put you into extremely uncomfortable spots that you can't weasel your way out of. You can't negotiate your way out of. You have to do your way through them.
And that you're not going to put yourself in on your own.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah. So in terms of reinventing yourself, so you got clarity, the business shifted in that direction. If somebody's listening to this and their challenge is mental and emotional, right? Which at the end of the day, it always falls back to that anyway, right?
Yeah,
like
totally.
Even if you have financial challenges, it's really a mental and emotional challenge that you're dealing with because of this external stimuli that is the finances.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you meditated for 3 days. What's an internal shift for somebody to make that's really struggling right now? That feels either they don't know what their life's about, they're struggling with their finances, they're struggling with their marriage, they're struggling. What are some foundational beliefs, paradigm shifts, mindsets? I know in your new book, right? That's number one. That's the first growth accelerator that you teach in the new book is develop the right mindset of non-negotiable values to reimagine your business. So whether it's applying to their business, what is the internal mental emotional shift that somebody can make that can really help you go, hey, look, it's not as bad as you think. You are more capable. You are more resourceful. Let's speak on that.
Yeah. So, and know that when we can replace the word business with cause or impact, because at the end of the day, again, this is very Tony Robbins-esque. When you live in service, selfless service for others, That's what gives us purpose. Okay?
Yeah.
This is not, we are creatures of service. I believe that that's one of the gifts of parenthood. When
Yeah.
you have a child, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you.
Yeah.
So, and I happen to find the concept of gratitude by itself very shallow.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's an easy word to say, and it's an easy thing to tell people to have, but it's really, really hard when you are lost and frustrated and sad and upset and depressed and anxious. And it's like, grateful for what? Great words, F you follows that. It's like, So I think gratitude is cultivated, and it doesn't come just from within. It's gratitude for the we. And that could be you and your creator. It could be you and your spouse, you and your children, or you and your cause. So having said that, to me, I do think starting with your values, your non-negotiables are really important. These are the things I'm willing to live with and absolutely not. And there's a little phrase I use often. It's it's about when you create your community, the people you surround yourself with. And if there's a turd in the punch bowl, everyone gets sick. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole idea is who you let into your world, including your values, are what are sickening you. And what makes us sick is when we compromise, when we allow ourselves to be overpowered by either a sick environment or sick people or sick decisions. And the mindset needs to come from, like, for example, I've got a bunch of core mindsets. I'll give you one, for example, that I know has been the cause of almost all the pain and agony I had in my life, which is I now say, if this person, place, or thing that I am deciding to do something with or for would ever create more than 5% aggravation, the answer is no. Now, how do I determine that? What I do is I do what Gay Hendricks talks about. You take a big, deep breath in, you go, and you just test that out on your body. Will this person, place, or thing ever create more than 5% aggravation in my life? Yep. It's a hell no, just like that.
Yeah.
I know it, and it's a hard no, no matter what.
Protecting your mental and emotional well-being,
Yeah, your field.
Yeah.
And then I also do the same thing with antagonism. Will this person, place, or thing ever create antagonism? I don't like feeling antagonized at all. It's bullying, right?
Yeah.
And bullying is the cause of a lot of trauma. So the short answer is, sometimes to get out of a deeply emotional, challenging place, you've got to use logic first and then feel into it. It creates a framework.
Lead with logic, yeah.
Yep. So so that's basically, I start with the mindsets, the non-negotiable values, and what I must live with and what I must not. Here's another one for me. It's my physical environment. I live in San Diego on purpose. I grew up in Minnesota. I hate being cold. I hate it. And I don't want, this is a non-negotiable. I don't want to fix it. There's nothing wrong. But and now that I had chemo, I get chills easily. Like, it hurts my bones.
Yeah.
So being in any kind of physical pain, hard no. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's another one of those. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's important.
No, it does. I want to also talk about you mentioning adding value for other people.
Yes.
Right? I think that's arguably one of the most important, underrated, underfocused on aspects of a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
And especially when you're going through a really difficult mental and emotional time in your life.
Yes.
I've found that one of my mentors used to say, get off self and get on purpose.
Yes.
Right? You are almost narcissistic, for an interesting use of the word, right? In terms of, like, dude, you're focusing all over yourself and you're freaking out. Get off yourself. Stop worrying about yourself. And when you focus your energy on, hey, how can I go make my wife's life better? How can I go make my kids' lives better? How can I serve clients?
Yeah.
How can I'm going to go for a walk outside and I'm going to smile and say hello to every person that I come in contact with and just light up their life. All of a sudden, your problems, at least your perceived problems, fade
Totally.
into the distance, fade into the background, right? And they're replaced by feelings of love and joy and connection. And so, so to me, that's one of the most important things. If you're struggling internally, get off yourself and get on a purpose of adding value to the lives of the people. Just speak on that.
Yep. So step one was mindset, non-negotiable values. Step two is the market you wish to serve. So this is simply put, the first person you have to help is you. You're no good if you're broken.
Yeah.
And the way to heal oneself is to be in service and to create impact. So if you want to create massive impact, be in service, create a movement. But that begins with a movement of help one person, and then help another, and then develop a framework. Start looking at, examine your thinking and how you solve the problem, how you created solutions and fixes. And the framework is a fill-in-the-blanks toolkit that you're allowed to modify, change, break at any time. So I often say, I ask this question, do you know what rules are? If I said, do you know what rules are, Hal?
Yes.
What's the answer?
Guidelines of how to behave, what to do and what not to do?
Yeah, rules are for other people. Okay, I don't believe in rules. I break them all the time. I don't believe in them.
Sure.
Okay? Now, I say that not because I'm better than, it's just like what keeps us stuck. Now, having a civilized society does require rules and laws.
Sure.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about our constructs. So the point of this is you create a framework that you allow yourself to evolve and break at any time.
So like the savers, would you say, would that fit a framework?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my framework for creating a next act is mindset. Those are the values, the market. Who do you want to serve? Who do you love? Who would you love to spend all your time with? What are they like? How do they think? What do they believe? And then the model, which is what's your promise? What's your brand promise? As a character, as a brand, you wish to deliver value. What is the highest promise that you could fulfill and deliver to someone? So this becomes this character that you live in, that you develop, this hero. I believe you can change who you are by creating a character that you can live into, right? It's like a vision board for yourself. You know, you're not born anyway. You're not a static thing. You are a dynamic, pliable being that is capable of anything. And if you don't believe that, then create a character you can believe in and act like
An
and
avatar.
show up that way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it is an avatar. And then the next is the message. So in other words, what's the story one must tell in order to get there? So as an example, the way I train my brain, I don't watch movies. I pay attention to the stories and the characters. And I say, how can I use this character, this story, to elevate someone else? I don't watch it for entertainment anymore. I consume content to apply an inspirational, aspirational character we can create together that someone can live into. So who do you admire, right? And then the media, which that's the fifth step, is how do you want to reach people? Hal Elrod reaches his audience with a message of a miracle morning, and there's a lot to unravel and unwind there through podcasts, through his book, through his blog, through social media, through guesting, through speaking, right? And then finally, the multipliers. What ways can make the biggest difference, the most impact with the least amount of effort? So if I said, Hal Elrod, how have you found right now the most effective way to reach the most people? What's the strategy or tactic you use to do that?
Podcast interviews.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So, and if you see an increase in book sales, sales of your products, people reaching out saying, oh my God, Hal Elrod, you changed my life. You had a massive impact. I just do a lot more of the thing that works best, right?
Sure.
That's the multiplier mindset. And we, as human beings, we get bored easily. We get distracted easily. We think that, we get to one side and we're like, the grass on the other side of the fence looks greener.
Yeah.
Let me try something else. Let me get distracted with a shiny object or a new guru who I like what they sound like today.
Yeah.
Instead of paying attention to multiplying the multipliers. So that framework, I found I can literally solve any identity challenge by applying this. It hasn't broken once, and I've also used it to create multi-million-dollar businesses that way. So with Justin, we created a lifestyle investor character. And Justin lived into that because we also created the rules. In this case, we called it the 10 Commandments of Lifestyle Investing. So they already existed. They had never been articulated or structured before. And now he teaches his methodology within that framework.
Yeah. And, and that's a great example of him using your framework where before the lifestyle investor, before that was his brand and what he was known as, he was a division manager for Cutco Cutlery.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I knew him. But he knew he could be more. He wanted to be more,
Totally.
in terms of he just saw a bigger opportunity to impact and reach more people. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful way of, that's a professional example of reinventing himself from a division manager working for a company to having his own company, right, with a completely different, objective.
Yeah.
To help other people create financial freedom for themselves and their families. And so I think whether you want to reinvent yourself personally or professionally, all of these principles, apply. And you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to adopt an identity of what you're capable of being, right?
Yeah.
Your potential, not your past. And then ultimately, you've got to serve other people.
Yep.
And the more people you serve, the more impact you make, the more fulfilled you are, and the more everybody wins.
Yeah.
Right.
And the more momentum you create and you hone your system, this is, I think, the other one is during that really difficult tipping point when you've lost all courage, all confidence, you're uncommitted, and you have no clarity. You can't imagine a bigger, brighter life for yourself. And it's like, how am I going to get this flywheel spinning up? How am I going to create any momentum when I can't even fix myself?
Yeah.
And the answer is, you have to put yourself into a position where you put so much skin in the game that the loss of that will really, really hurt. So if you want a miracle, you've got to invest in a miracle and show up expecting a miracle. So, I have a rule that I live by now, which is like working with me is really expensive.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't show up 100% all in, there's no refunds and there's no guarantee. Okay. Now, I'm not going to work with someone who I know I can't help.
Sure.
But the point is, if they show up and they're not 100% all in, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I know. I'm the best in the world at what I do. And I can confidently say that now. I don't just believe it. I know it. And everyone I've worked with recently has succeeded. Okay.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to have the confidence to say that. And secondly, I have a system that flat out works, that I'm always making better. I have a great team. And just to get to the place where you know that to be true, which in that belief in yourself permeates and engenders trust. I call it a transfer of certainty. That is a contagious, beautiful, high quality, positive virus.
Yeah.
Transfer of certainty. But the point being, when you engage with a coach, you've got to invest so much it will hurt if you don't show up and you're not all in.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, the investment that I had to make to fix and repair myself was massive. It was a multiple six-figure investment. And it was a lot more cash than I had access at the time, too.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you were in a bad financial position when you invested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I tell anyone is when you start doing something for someone else, you have to be willing. This is a Gay Hendricksism that is changed my life. He said the number one reason most people never reinvent themselves and never grow and continue to fail is they are not willing to receive. So a manifestation, a little exercise I do with everyone I work with now, I do it for myself. Now, I have this place across the street from the ocean, so I get to look at the ocean, which represents a metaphor for God's abundance and love. And God, I believe, wants you to have anything you desire. And everything that you could possibly ever want or desire or manifest or create already exists. It belongs to you and you belong to it. And the only thing preventing you from experiencing that is your willingness to receive it. So what I visualize is, imagine your heart has a door and you have to be willing to open the door and allow God to pour the entire ocean inside of you. So are you willing to receive all the abundance and all the love and all the possibility and potential that God wants you to have, that already belongs to you, that is yours? And there is no scarcity. You're not taking anything away from anyone else. By allowing that to be inside you, you become a multiplying vessel, only creating more. That's what I believe.
Beautiful. I really don't want to add anything to that because that was such a beautiful, eloquent way to wrap this episode up. I'll just say that for everybody listening, wherever you are in your life right now, it's exactly where you need to be to learn what you need to learn to become the person that you need to be to create everything you want for your life. And just know that. Just you're not starting at zero, right? You have all the experience and knowledge and wisdom you've gained in your life up until this point, and so you are further along than you have ever been, even if it feels like you're further back than you've ever been. So start where you are, but look at what's possible for you and live in alignment with that potentiality, and go re-listen to this episode and write down what Mike said and add your affirmations. Goal achievers and members of the Miracle Morning community, I love you. Mike, I love you, brother. So great to talk to you today, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to spending some more time with you, my friend.
You too, man. Until next time.
All right.